Yes, you're watching the SA Sports Show. Time to talk about the SANFL, so we thought we'd go to the expert in the SANFL. Luke Macchiaro joins us. Luke, how are you, mate?
Good, thanks, guys.
Haven't seen you for a while, mate.
Yeah, good to be back. So yeah,
been a bit too busy for us, mate.
Pardon? Oh, no, absolutely not. Been trying to keep up with this competition with all the swings and roundabouts across the season.
Let's talk about the competition, because 1 week it looks like this team could win it. Next week they look like they'd be lucky if they don't finish bottom. It has been a really interesting season, hasn't it?
It's been bizarre, really. Apart from those top three teams, Glenelg, Sturt, and Adelaide, any of those teams look like world beat. That bottom seven go from looking like world beaters to looking like they wouldn't beat the Div 7, reserves or whatever else. It's been an incredible season, really swings and roundabouts, and shows probably how even the competition really is.
Mate, Tipster's nightmare, mate. That's what it is.
I mean, other than Glenelg, I suppose Glenelg and Sturt, they're set. I don't think they can miss out now, and they look like the two teams that most likely could play in the grand final. With Glenelg, rightfully 11 wins in a row, sitting whoever's going to be the challenger. But even saying that, there's sometimes with Sturt where you go, they're vulnerable. Could you pick, if you had to pick it right now and said to you, who's your two teams to play in the grand final? Who would you go for?
I think it's probably Glenelg, and the biggest variable with the next two teams in Adelaide and Port is just their availability with players as well. So I think you probably lean Sturt, especially given they've got a few players back. So Tom Lewis came back on the weekend, and if they can keep their best 22 out there, they're probably the second best team in the competition. But I think their biggest issue is going to be to kick a winning score against a team like Glenelg. They've just got so many avenues to goal and so many options when they go into their forward line.
A side like that interests me a lot is West Adelaide, who, they might be sitting, I think they're sitting down close second bottom at the moment, but I think they're better than that. I think they've played better than that. I think I beat by a goal on the weekend again. They've lost some close ones.
Lost 6 games by less than 3 goals, and it's a real credit to Adam Hartlett. As you look at that 22 or that squad of players that they put out, and you probably don't recognise a lot of the guys, but they've done really well at recruiting from other clubs. So they've got players around the fringes. So Callum Park couldn't get into Glenelg's premiership team. He's probably been a top 15 player in the competition this year. Yeah. Kobe Ryan was a draft age kid last year that missed out. He's probably been one of the better midfielders in the competition, averaging 26, 27 disposals a game. So they've done a really good job with that. And the other thing with West Adelaide is they've actually pushed players onto the next level. A lot of key position players. So Harry Barnett at West Coast, Riley Philthorpe at Adelaide, Harry Lemmy at Carlton. They've been able to push guys on from the SANFL level to the AFL level. So they're doing something right at West Adelaide, and they're building that group of players, and they're probably 12 months away from really challenging for the finals.
Okay.
It's a really interesting one, though. Marty Mattner, we had him in a few weeks ago, and he was talking how they took the long game, started to develop their young kids, get games into them. And that's fine when you're finishing in the middle or you've won a premiership, but Westies come from that base where they've been struggling for a long time. How do they keep those players there next year from other clubs coming in and poaching them?
I think you just build the culture, and you've just got to keep guys that are involved in the club. And when you give guys an opportunity, someone like a Callum Park or, some of these guys that haven't earned opportunities at other clubs, and you give them a chance to shine, they feel really indebted to the club. And I think you've seen that a little bit with West Adelaide and what they've tried to build as a group.
Yeah.
And they're on the improve, and I think there's a lot to like at that footy club and what they're trying to do on the field as well.
Have you been surprised by South Adelaide and North Adelaide? I mean, they're two teams that recruited pretty well, went into the ex-AFL kind of players. So we're talking about Westies that haven't really got any of the big name players, and although they're not winning, they're developing. North looked like on the back of last year they were going to be a grand final kind of team. And a lot of talk about South Adelaide, yet they're down the ladder a bit.
Just experienced teams that have been so inconsistent. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that when you get those older guys in, you probably expect a bit more consistency in the way they play. And South Adelaide especially, they looked fantastic against the Eagles last week, and then probably didn't convert against North on the weekend. And North are the same. They got beaten by Westies, they got beaten by Sturt, and then come out and play really well and beat the Crows. So there's some really inconsistencies with those groups, and you think probably North Adelaide are the one that could get the ship right. They've got some players coming back. Their reserves are quite strong. They've got some good players playing down there. South Adelaide, who knows with them? I think they're still around the mark, but they've got a lot of work to do to get themselves back in the mix and the run home.
Centrals, mate, have they surprised you this year? And I suppose the Eagles, again, we're talking about that inconsistency. Centrals have definitely shot up from last year, and the Eagles have been the same, inconsistent.
Centrals are a little bit like the Crows, I think. When they play at the Ponderosa, they play really well. A bit like Adelaide in the AFL at Adelaide Oval, they look fantastic, and then they go on the road and they really struggle. Even in Nuriupta on the weekend, they got belted around the contest by the Crows, and at Elizabeth Oval, they beat them on the weekend. They've been able to keep that group together. They're just, it's a mark of the competition, again, those inconsistencies, and the Eagles are a little bit the same as well. They seem to really struggle against some of these sides, and then they'll come out and play some really good footy in patches as well. So I think it's just indicative of the whole competition and, the way it's sort of panned out this year.
There's some very big games on the weekend.
Well, there sure are.
Yep. Starting with the first one, Glenelg and Adelaide down at Glenelg. That is the game, isn't it, really? given that, well, they're sitting 1 and 2 or no, 1 and 3 at the moment. So, wow, that's a biggie.
Glenelg have been super impressive. I think, they're the story of the year with Darren Reeves and what he's been able to do to get the most out of his playing group. Matty Allen had a really down year last year and is probably one of the Magarey medal favourites right now with how he's played. They've got such options in their forward line and they've reinvented some players as well. They found Jonty Scharenberg back into that side as a defender. They got Brett Turner back into their midfield, takes some pressure off Luke Partington. Corey Lyons has probably had a much better year than last year. So I think they'll probably beat the Crows on the weekend. I just think that they've got so many options in that forward line.
Wow.
And against a really young Crows defence, I think they'll be able to exploit them and kick a winning score.
Wow.
Well, Port and North will be an interesting one, mate. So Port have won 3 and lost 2 of their last 5. North have won 2 and lost 3, but they've won their last 2. So where do you go with this one?
They always play close games, generally, these two teams over the last couple of years. And, it was indicative. It was an 8-point result in round earlier this year. I think North Adelaide will win. I think the biggest thing with Port Adelaide is they travel this weekend, so they're taking emergencies, they're taking a sub, takes 3 or 4 out, and I think North Adelaide are just starting to find something. So ground that win out against the Crows, ground a win out against South Adelaide on the weekend. If they can grind one more out, all of a sudden they're sort of cemented in that top 4 and looking to set their season up. But yeah, it's a really important game for both of those teams.
And Eagles and Nord at Woodville, there's another game that is so important for both sides. I mean, I know Nord are sitting right down the bottom, but what are they? 6 points? What are they? They're 6 points away from 5th. So, it's not over, but
back in the old wrestling days, I used to call them loser leaves town matches, and I think it's probably a losers town match for both of those sides' finals aspirations. The Eagles have been really disappointing, I think. I think they've got a really good group of players, and they got Browie back into that team, they got Sam Williams back into that team, and they're a really experienced group, and they've just been so inconsistent. And I know they're trying to bud some kids and get some games into guys, but there's enough experience in that group where when they're healthy, they should be more competitive than what they are. And I think they'll beat Norwood at home on the weekend, but who knows with that group? I think that they're probably really inconsistent and been one of the disappointments this year.
Sturt and the Panthers?
I think Sturt will win. I think Sturt are building quite nicely. I was really impressed, with the way they grind out that game against West on the weekend. A lot of things didn't go well for them in the first half, but their midfield mix is really good now with Battersby and Lewis on the inside, and then they've got these really good outside players. So Marty Frederick obviously came over from Port Adelaide. They picked Malachi Carruthers from their reserves, who's come up into their league side. It's been really good the last few weeks. Is another running outlet player. So they've got some dangerous, and their defence is probably the best in the competition. Will Coomblas, Guy Page, Casey Voss. They're so reliable in that back 6, and they're really consistent. And I think they'll be able to, hold South Adelaide and then kick a winning score themselves.
2 teams are out of the race at the moment, or they're out of the 5. Westies and Centrals, they meet at Richmond. That also now becomes a massive game for both clubs as well.
I think West Adelaide will really fancy themselves in that game at home. It's a massive game for Central District. I think if they lose, it's going to be really hard for them to make the finals. They'll be 2 games out, and I just think that they have to win with the quality that they've got in that side with guys like Jared Schiller and Harry Grant's been fantastic. Kyle Pressbury's back. They really should be winning that game if they're going to be a serious finals contender. And if they don't, I think the pressure will be on Paul Thomas in that game because I think it's a game they really should be winning. If they've got aspirations for September action.
Okay, you mentioned, I know this is we're only 12 rounds in or whatever at the moment, but you mentioned a Magarey medal favourite. Who'd be the top 3 or 4 at the moment, mate, running around?
I think Matty Allen is definitely amongst the leaders in what he's been able to do for Glenelg. I think he's been their best player. I think James Battersby has been fantastic for Sturt, their skipper, leading through the midfield as well. I think Harry Schoenberg will be around the mark for Adelaide. He's been really consistent for them, but now he's in their AFL side. He'll probably drop out of that mix as well. And the wild card is probably a guy like Harry Grant at Central District has been really consistent as a midfielder. And Callum Park as a running defender has probably been one of the top 7 or 8 players for West Adelaide in the competition this year too. So really good mix and a really good even competition.
Luke Macchiaro, our special guest and the best in the SANFL.
Yep.
Always appreciate catching up with you, mate. Stay with us. Still plenty to come.